So, Harold,
Yes.
you know me. I'm Dr. R, and we've known each other a while. And today we're going to talk about happiness and positivity and aging well. And when I thought about putting this video together, you were the first person I thought about because you're like the poster child for happiness, positivity, and aging well. I did want to tell you something before we start, that there are some women playing cards in the other room and they get a little noisy at times. So if you hear anything in the other room, we'll tell them to pipe down, but they shouldn't bother us any, okay?
Fine.
We're going to be here to talk about joyous living as we get older. As a physician, my career was to treat disabilities, but I also was very involved in helping people to prevent disabilities. I was a geriatric physician and a disability physician. And many of the disabilities that we deal with are entirely preventable. One of the major ways that we need to challenge ourselves as we age is to not get stuck in our ways, to continue to learn, to use our brains, to use our bodies, and not be afraid to seek happiness and laughter and joyfulness, especially as we're getting older. So, as I said, Harold's the poster child for all of those things. He's an amazing person. He's funny, he's happy, he's positive. He doesn't let the little things in life get you down. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. You're very involved in the community, and you travel a lot with your dear wife, Sheila.
Yes.
So that's what I know. And I know that you're not afraid to try new things. You're not afraid of getting unstuck from patterns that we often get into as we get older. And you're not afraid to grow and expand as a person, which I really admire about you, truly admire about you. And I mean that. So I've told Harold this a number of times. Since I first met you, I've said that I want to be like you when I grow up.
Okay.
If I ever grow up. And I asked you here to talk about your approach to life, how you keep your brain and your body active, specifically because at 80 years old, Harold decided to try something new, totally new, and take on a big acting role. He had never acted before in his life, although you've given presentations and you've spoken in front of groups.
Yes.
But he didn't just go at taking a little minor part in a play. He took the biggest part in the play. In fact, when I met him, I was working with a theater group as a volunteer, and I found out from the artistic director that she had cast Harold, who had never acted before in his life, to play the part in a one-man show. To me, that's like climbing Mount Everest.
And tell me about it.
You've been a math teacher, so you had some presentation skills.
Yes.
You've done a lot of other things, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to just ask you at first, now that I've given this big introduction, is when the artistic director first asked you if you would take this on, what were your first thoughts?
Well, she never told me what I was going to be doing. She invited me to breakfast. So I'm saying, okay, the Free Theater of Brevard, they probably want a check. No problem. We'll go have breakfast. I went to breakfast and I met Dr. Rubin. And she presented me with this script, sitting on the president's shoulder. I had no idea what it was about. I thought, well, okay, she wants me to participate in this opening production for the theater. I'll be one of the members of the cast, and I can get lost in this scenery and everything. And that's when she told me that you'll be the only character. And I said, okay. And I'm saying, I have no acting skills, no training. Yes, I've been on stage. I'm not shy. I'm extroverted. I'll do the best I can. and I'll let you know if I can't do it also. I'm not going to make a fool of myself or the script or the theater. Those were the things that were on my mind. And it was fun. I like doing things that are fun.
And that was probably what was the most amazing thing. Is this, you would think would be nerve-wracking doing something like that. And yet you always had this joyful, fun attitude from beginning to end, because I worked with you, with the artistic director, the director, day in and day out. You worked for a couple of months to pull this off on Looking Over the President's Shoulder. It's a 2-hour, 1.5 to 2 hour, one-man show. And I still, and this is months ago now that you performed this, and I still have people coming up to me in my neighborhood saying, Harold was amazing. You were amazing, and you pulled it off. But how did you feel about that when you were doing that, about how it makes you feel as a person once you had gotten to the point where you were able to complete the task?
Well, I read the entire script or so forth, and I was familiar with the story. And I had been to all of the places that they mentioned in the story. I've been to the White House, I've been to the East Room. Slightly familiar with the butlers and the cook stories in the White House. And looking over the president's shoulder, you're not really talking about anything that the president was doing. You was talking about his life. And that's all I thought about it. And everybody says I was the perfect person to be cast in this role. And after reading the script, I thought that also, because I was just familiar with the story. So I read it, and I've read it probably, I'd say 100, maybe 200 times. I don't know, because I read it every day, 3 and 4 times a day. So I morphed into this person. So when I actually did the play, I was this character. That's who I was.
Dr. Janet Rubin had told me that she cast you for the part because you had come and volunteered as an usher for the Free Theater. And she saw you and she thought, you looked so dignified, you looked like you would fit the role. That's what she told me. And I said, well, he's an usher, but can he act? And you showed us that you could. It was amazing. Now, you were a math teacher, but that was your first retirement. But what did you do before you retired?
Well, actually, math was my second career.
Okay, good. So let's talk about what you did earlier on in life.
My first career, I played with trains for 22 years. I started out as a conductor. I went into the control towers, which means I set up the routes around New York City, 4 of the 5 boroughs, because we don't go into Staten Island. And like I said, I was a conductor. I went into the control towers. Then I became what they call a yard master. That's where they lay the trains up and store them at night. We take them apart. Not we, they took them apart. It was my job to determine how to take them apart, where to put them, and so they can be repaired and inspected and put back together to be placed into service again the next morning. So probably the most important part of that job really was being a tower operator, learning the routes all over New York City. New York City never sleeps, for one thing. It's like 24/7, so it can never stop. If there's a derailment, if there's a water main break, if there's a suicide or a collision, the trains have to continue moving. My job was to know how to move trains around New York City, no matter what. One of my managers, when I first went into J Street, the headquarters, and he told me that being a tower operator, he said, I can teach anybody. I can teach a monkey how to move trains around, New York City. He says, what I need you for is when there's a problem, how to keep things moving. And so I went down to J Street. They took me down there, and I wrote up a lot of general orders and bringing trains, new sets of trains in from Japan, the Kawasaki trains, and floating them across the Hudson River and dragging them down the streets of Brooklyn into the Coney Island yard. And then they would distribute them out to the various divisions in the New York City Transit Authority. And that was one of the bigger projects that I did when I was in J Street, along with allocating money and funds to run the division operations.
So you were doing a lot of management that it seems like would be incredibly stressful and challenging. Was it stressful to you at the time?
Not at all.
Why not? I mean, most people would take that as a pretty stressful kind of job.
I'm good at what I do. And when you know what you're doing, it's not stressful.
But it's also somewhat attitude, right? I mean, if a train derails and suddenly you got to get the commuters home,
That's exciting.
that's exciting to you.
Yes.
So then you did that for how many years? You worked?
22 years I worked for New York City Transit Authority. I've been retired 35 years. So that seems like a pretty good investment. One of the other biggest things that happened in New York City, I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, I retired in 1991, June. There was a big derailment on 14th Street. One of the train operators, motorman, he was a little inebriated that evening, and he derailed a train going across a switch at 14th Street on the Lexington Avenue line, which was my section, my division that I controlled when I became a superintendent. That was one of the things. The other thing that I remember also was 9/11, when the towers were hit, and everyone was calling, trying to find me and my brother. My brother Roger was a bus operator, and his bus used to sit at the base of the World Trade Center. So they're calling us, trying to find out, where are they? Where are they?
Oh, wow.
And we were sitting in Kissimmee at Star Island Resort, which I sit on the board of that particular resort there. And we were having a glass of wine, getting ready to go to a board of directors meeting. And the first tower went down. I said, oh, well, these towers will never be 102 stories again, maybe 80, So we left the condominium. We went over to the office for the meeting that morning. By the time I got over to the meeting, everybody was saying, oh, 2 towers are down. I said, no. I said, only 1 tower got hit. They said, no, 2 towers. So when we got over there, we looked at the news, and everything had, imploded. Of course, thousands of people died that particular day. Very tragic, and those are some of the things I remember from my career. But I had retired in June, so 91, so this was 10 years after I retired.
Now you are now vice president of the New York City Transit Retirees of Florida, and you're still real involved with the New York City Transit people. Is that true? The retirees, at least?
Yes, let's see, we have, I believe it's 11 chapters throughout Florida. And it's all the people that retired from New York City Transit Authority that have relocated into Florida. And I belong to the Melbourne Palm Bay Chapter 3. And I'm actually the treasurer of that chapter. And I sit also on the state board as the first vice president.
So you actually traveled to meetings, and because I know you and Sheila had been to a meeting recently that
Yes.
you had mentioned to me. So you're very involved with not just our local community with doing volunteer work, but you're very involved with statewide organizations as well. You have children
Yes.
and grandchildren.
Yes.
They come and visit you.
Yes.
They keep you young.
I try to stay away from them. They have too much energy for me.
Why do you say that? How old are your grandchildren?
Let me see. Well, let's start with my oldest grandson, Julius Lee Richardson Chatters. His middle name is the same as mine, Lee. And when he was born, my daughter, she was going to name him Julius after his father, Lee after me, and she was going to name him Chatters after his father. And I talked to Shauna, and I said, Shauna, you might want to hyphenate his last name. It might be beneficial to him somewhere down the road. So that's how he became Julius Lee Richardson Chatters. That's my oldest. He's just turned 29 on the 28th of December. My next grandchild is Mia Azalea Mata, and she is 14 going on 23. And she's the one who's pretty well grounded. She wants to be a dancer. She lives in Poughkeepsie, New York. And she's like most teenagers. This is her first year of high school. She's enjoying herself and discovering herself and just watching things. That's what I like about it. She watches everything that goes on around her, and she listens, you know. And then there is Ezra Lubin Mata, and he's 11 years old. And he's in middle school now, and he likes math. He likes to swim, so that he finally learned how to swim. So those are my 3 grandchildren.
They bring you happiness, and you joke that you don't want, they have too much energy, but you have a lot of energy too, right? I've seen your energy in rehearsals. I can tell you. And you're always upbeat and you're always happy. I would say you probably are someone who believes in not sweating the small stuff. Would you say that about yourself when you're around your children, your grandchildren, when you're around things that might be stressful? Do you tell them that?
Well, one thing, I don't sweat and I don't panic because I usually know what I'm doing, and I always try to do the best. So when you look at a scale of 1 to 10, you say always try to do your best. Your best could be 1 or your best could be 10. Nobody ever knows. But I just tell everyone, do your best. And that's the best you can do. Like I said, I don't panic. You know, don't lose your head. Your brain is in it.
That's very good advice. I was thinking about, I had been writing about this in some recent video that we did, and that life satisfaction is tied to having close relationships with your friends and your family. And you clearly have close relationships with your wife, Sheila.
Yes.
Oh, can you please tell me that story for the camera about what we talked about before? Because Sheila is a wonderful person. I've met her a number of times now with the theater group. But tell the audience exactly what Sheila knew about your part in the theater.
Oh, let me see. Sheila knew absolutely nothing, 0. She used to tell me every evening when I went out to rehearsal, she says, oh, there goes the little actor. And I said, I'm not an actor. I'm telling a story. And that's how I looked at that role. I wasn't acting. I was telling a story. So that's why I had to learn Alonzo's story so that I can just tell it. So I wasn't acting. Sheila, she worked in, pre-kindergarten. And she used to tell my grandson, especially Julius, that's her favorite out of our 3. She loves the other 2. But when she was teaching him reading, she used to always say, you know, you read with expression, you know. And so like when you're acting, you know, you just can't read lines. You have to breathe life into them. You have to act like this is really what's happening, you know. So when there's things to do, sometimes you have to raise your voice, you lower it, you whisper, your expressions, you know, show expression. She used to tell Julius all the time. And that's all I did when I was telling this story. I was just...
But Sheila didn't actually know that it was...
She didn't know anything that I was the only actor in the play. And she said when she came in, she asked me, she says, well, where should I sit so that I could see you when you're on stage? So I told her, I said, just sit any place. I said, I think you'll be able to see me. So she took a seat. I believe the first night she was like stage right. And she said she started to play and I came out and she's listening to me and she's waiting. She's looking at her watch, you know, and she's waiting for the other actors because she saw this long table and 3 chairs. And at some point, someone else has to come out. She said after about an hour, she kind of understood that it was probably just going to be me.
So you never even told her it's a one-man show?
Oh no, I didn't.
And you didn't.
I didn't tell her
You
anything.
didn't tell her anything about your role.
No, because I didn't want any negative comments about, you can't do this, because I don't know whether she recognizes yet, but I can do anything that I set my mind to.
That's really an important statement you just made. You can do anything you set your mind to, and you have incredible confidence. And that is a really important point when it comes to joyous living and to happiness. You don't have any fear.
No.
You're not afraid, you don't worry.
No.
You figure, like you said before, even if your best is 1 out of 10, that's the best you can do. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have any fear that you couldn't figure out a way to get that role. I remember the audiences, because I was there every night pushing buttons for the lights.
My team.
And we had a team of people who were all for you, but the audience for some of the shows was mostly made up, it seemed like, of your friends and family for some of the shows. You had a lot of people coming from far away, a couple hours away, just to see you perform.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even see the audience. I saw my wife. I knew Benny and Diane from the NAACP. I knew they were there. That was the first performance. I could see Dr. Rubin off to the right. I sort of saw you. You were on the right up in the booth. And of course, on the other side, I forget the names right now. What is her name? Young lady.
Grace.
Yeah, Grace.
Yeah,
How could I
up in the
forget?
sound booth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are the people that I saw. And
you didn't really...
that special person, Brian.
Yeah.
Without Brian, none of this would have happened.
We'll give Brian the credit that he deserves.
Absolutely.
So you have lots of interests, you have lots of activities, what are your hobbies besides what we've already talked about? Do you have any other hobbies? We haven't talked about traveling, have we?
That is my hobby.
That's your hobby.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about what your favorite type of travel and enjoyment is, and how you make travel so enjoyable?
Well, let me see. Travel. Sheila and I, when we first met, Sheila was single, no children, anything. She had a job. The best thing on her resume is she didn't have any children. So I said, that's interesting. I like that. When we got married, I'm the one who brought the baggage to the relationship. But Sheila was always traveling. That's all she did. She traveled and she shopped. And she, of course, she took care of her mother, or they lived together. She said what attracted me to her was that I lived with my grandmother. Mm-hmm. So we were both taking care of our parents. And Sheila was always traveling. And I remember one of the first things, she was taking her mother to California, and she invited me. She says, "Oh, why don't you go with us?" And I said, "Well, I can't go because my grandmother's at home and I can't, just leave her up and go." So Sheila took her house keys and she flipped them at me and says, "Will you check my mailbox?"
Ooh.
So that was my job for the 2 weeks she was gone, to check her mailbox. I lived in Westchester County. She lived in Queens, out by JFK Airport. So I had to drive out there and check her mailbox for her. And when you say travel, that's what Sheila always did. She always wanted to have a car and travel. From the time she was 19, she worked 2 jobs so that she can buy a car and travel. And my travel, I think I was introduced to traveling when I joined the military. And they took me to Europe during the Vietnam War. I followed orders. They said, go to Europe. It wasn't that I was afraid of war, because my idea was only old people die. I'm too young to die. That's how smart I was. So God says, we better send him to Europe. So I went to Europe. I wanted to be a musician. That's another part of my story. And I wanted to be on stage. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to be careful what you ask for, because God put me on stage. And that takes us to my next career, when I became a teacher.
Okay.
You're actually on stage. Uh-huh. And I perform for my students every day. And I used to tell them that I'm performing for you. But being in United States Army for 3 years, I was in Europe playing basketball, My DD-214 says that I was a Vietnam vet. You know, my wife loves to tell that story. I was over there playing basketball and going to all these different schools and things. Special weapons or nuclear weapons, atomic energy weapons over in Europe, part of NATO team. And so I spent 2.5 years over there traveling, going to school. And, you know, like God says, you know, I want to protect this guy because he's not too bright. So I spent my 3 years, but the best 3 years of my life, and I would do it all over again. All over again.
So you were traveling, and then you met Sheila. She was traveling, and now you travel, and you just came back from the Panama Canal.
Yes.
And you've got more things planned down the road. Big trips. You did some big trips, right?
Well, I guess so. Yes, I'm preparing now. In fact, this morning before I came to this interview, I was looking at my airline reservations. We'll be flying into Singapore. I'll be getting on a ship crossing the Indian Ocean, making several stops, and we'll end up in the coast of Africa, that big island out there, and Madagascar. Yes,
I was going to say, that sounds like Madagascar.
So it's like
Wow.
about 12, 13 days that we'll be sailing across the Indian Ocean. And so that's my next large trip.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. And so you two are happy, healthy, still traveling?
Yes, healthy and happy. My next trip, it's a smaller one, but we'll be up in Concord, North Carolina, again with some of the retirees that have retired with us. We'll be up there with them for a week, and also visiting other family and friends in Charlotte. And then I come back and I'm going to Vancouver with another couple from down in West Palm Beach. We just came off a cruise. I think I get them on because we are always traveling, but I believe they were on the last cruise we went. Yes, they went down to Costa Rica with me in the Panama Canal and stuff like that. So we'll be traveling with them in August to Vancouver to the jazz cruise.
Oh, so you're doing one of the jazz cruises?
I'll be doing the jazz
cruise. Because I know you're a fan of jazz like I am. I've done jazz cruises. Yeah. They're always fun.
And then, let me see, we come back from that. But that's just some of the things I plan. And then little things in between. I think Valentine's Day we'll be at a jazz festival on the beach down in Boca Raton.
You strike me as someone, I have some friends, and I say this myself, I don't know how I ever had time to work. I'm so busy in retirement. And you sound exactly the same way. You're so busy. You're always doing something. And do you think that leads you towards a purpose in retirement? Because I know that a lot of people say they need to find their purpose once they're retired, that work was their purpose before. What's your opinion on that?
My purpose? No, I never think of it. When I think of retirement, I always think about when I was like 13 or 14 and I walked into the Social Security office to get my Social Security card. And this little old lady, she says, when you reach 65, you can retire. And ever since I was 13 or 14, that's all I've ever thought about. I never thought about working. I've always thought about being retired.
Interesting.
And since I was 13 or 14, I was blessed and lucky that with the first job I had with the New York City Transit Authority, they had a pension, which is a foreign word now. All they have is these 401s. But I had a pension. And after 20 years, it allows me to retire with income for the rest of my life. More importantly than the income was the fringe benefits, the health benefits, the glasses, vision, and dental. That's what allowed me to step away from a very lucrative career in New York at age 45. Mm-hmm. I walked away. No one could believe that I was walking away from all of this money, but it wasn't money that ever made me happy in my life.
There we go. Let's talk about that. What makes you happy?
Well, people always say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always tell them I want to be healthy and happy in that order. And now when I stop and think, I'm healthy, relatively healthy. I don't have any ailments, a few aches and pains. And I'm pretty happy. You know, when I look around, I mean, I'm doing everything that I want to do. You know, visiting family and friends, that's the most important thing in my travel. It's always family and friends that I'm going to see because, you know, people leave here so quickly. And you always say, I should have called that person. I should have gone to see that person. Well, get up and go see them.
Right.
You know, I'm unemployed. I can do anything I want.
When I first met you, you said you didn't like to say you were retired. You like to say you were unemployed.
That's right. Yes, I don't have a job.
You don't have a job.
There you go.
I was going to ask you this. I believe that happiness is a skill that can be learned because some people are never taught ways to be happy. What do you think about that?
I don't dwell on the negative or bad things in life. You know, you're always paying so much attention to the, you know, the bad things. You know, there's so many good things going on in life. So, you know, and when I get up in the morning, I always do all my work, whatever it is. I get it out of the way so that I can play the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. And the military always, you know, we wake up at 4 and 5 in the morning. You know, I think that old phrase was, they said the Army does more by 8 o'clock than most people do all day. That is so true.
That is true. Do you watch a lot of TV?
No.
And you don't watch the news or read a lot of news?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. And there is some advice to say the less TV, the less news you watch, the happier you're going to be.
Well, you have to remember when you said TV and TV programs.
Or these days it's
programs.
Programs.
Learning, I learned this, you know, as a teacher, that learning, 90% of it is visual. Mm-hmm. What you watch, it goes into your eyes and directly into your brain, and you start believing what you see. Mm-hmm. So when you have TV programs, they're programming you to believe certain things. A lot of my friends say, oh, you live in Florida, all the hurricanes and the storms, you know, and it's because they watch TV. And when there's a hurricane or a shark biting you, they have to remember that the media, you know, they have to generate ratings. Mm-hmm. So when there's a hurricane, they take their cameras and they show you the house that's flooded.
Right.
You know, and if you just look straight down the street,
that's right.
That community is fine.
That's
right.
But
they don't show you that. You know.
Absolutely, because we've been through a lot of those. I've lived here 30 years. I've been through a lot of hurricanes. Let me ask you a question about exercise, because you're fit. You talk about how healthy you are, God willing, as we say. How do you stay so fit and energetic? Because you are full of energy.
Well, you know, so many people, they get up in the morning and say, I'm going to the gym. You know, they're trying to impress me. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to work out. You know, I say, if you just get up off your ass every day, instead of sitting in front of that television, you know, and sitting at that table eating those 3 meals a day, just get up and do something. It's exercise.
Okay.
You know.
So you don't have a specific regimen. You just make sure that you're active.
I get up and I do things. I don't sit around.
Okay.
I make sure that I go out at least 6 days a week.
Okay.
You know, I've become addicted to football in my latter years. I'll never play the game, but I watch it. Mm-hmm. I don't have any, I'm not a fan of any particular team, although I like the Kels and who's them guys out there, Andy Reid. That's my favorite team. I like it because their plays, how they play is so unpredictable, unscripted.
Okay.
You know, so I watch football. On the way over here, I just found out that Djokovic just beat Skinner playing tennis. You know, but now Alcaraz is waiting for him. You know, but that's another story. But I get out every day and I do something.
So you do something yourself, but you don't play tennis yourself. You don't play.
I used to play tennis, but you have to have a partner who to play with. So I don't have a tennis partner who plays tennis, so I don't play that. Plus, I don't have the stamina anymore to do 3 sets. I'm lucky if I can make it through 3 games now. In fact, I probably can't. So I've been bowling a lot.
Oh, that's right. We were talking about your bowling.
I like
so bowling
water.
is exercise, that's for sure. Picking up a 16-pound ball or a 14-pound ball and throwing it. Yes. Takes a lot. And you got to have the shoulder strength, the torso strength. Absolutely.
Yeah. And water is one of my favorite activities. I don't swim as much as I used to, but I have the access to it. As we sit here now, I'm looking at the Atlantic Ocean, and there's pools in my development. When I downsized, I got rid of my home with the large pool and all of that because that was work. It kept me from traveling. But I can go swimming anytime I want, day or night.
Mm-hmm. There's a myth that people get grumpier as they get older. And I haven't found that. I actually haven't found a lot of grumpy people that are older or get grumpier. There are a few. The psychology research doesn't bear that out. I was wondering what your take is on that, whether you think that that's part of what we do as we age, people get grumpier, or if you think that's also
I think people are grumpy because they have regrets. They have regrets. My mother passed away when I was 15. My grandmother and my great-grandmother, they relocated back from Jersey, gave up their lives over there. Not so much gave it up, but they didn't want to take me away from New York City and to where they were. They wanted to keep me in my environment with my friends. So I've always been around older people. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, my great-grandmother. I had this job in a grocery store when I was in high school, and the two people, Agnes and James Burns, I worked in their store, and they taught me how to deal with people. I could say certain things to you in a certain way, but somebody else might have a different personality. So I learned how to approach people with different ways, which helped me in my managerial career. When you're working, I had probably maybe, let's say, 30,000 or more people that, as a superintendent underneath me.
Wow.
Not that I talk to 30,000
Right,
people, because I like to delegate when it comes to work.
Sure. You had to in that kind of situation.
Yes.
You'd have to.
But you learn different personalities and how to get people to do things. What they call it, Psych 101 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
To get people to do things, and they don't realize that you're getting them to do it.
But how do you deal with grumpiness as older people get? You said your grandmother, you mentioned.
My grandmother wasn't grumpy at all.
Yeah, so you don't think that we have to necessarily get grumpy as we get older, but if we have a lot of regrets, that may contribute to it. Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to impart about how we should continue to smile and be joyous and happy as we get older?
Well, as I look at this world today, and I see all the things that are going on, and like I say, if you pay attention to all the negative stuff, it kind of drags you down, and that's why I don't watch too much news. I watch the headlines, but I don't get into the weeds of what's going on. When I get up in the morning, I want to know what the weather is, what highways are open and closed, or the construction, so that I can get around, because I know I'm going to be out doing things. But what was the question?
Any last thoughts on how we can keep people, allow the audience to think about ways that'll contribute to the joyous, happy way that you live your life? You're really doing it well, and you can impart wisdom to other people. What would you say is the best?
In my life, I like to fix the small problems in your life, no matter what it is. Because if you don't take care of the small problems, they grow into larger problems. It's like building a house. It's one brick at a time. It's like education. I didn't go to college until after I came out of the service. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared, and I knew that. But after I came out of the military, I was more focused on that I needed more education. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed more education. And you just have to pay attention to the important things in life. There's so many, other things that, you can do without. And you have a choice in life. You have a choice, and there's always consequences too. So think about that too. Try to make good choices, and don't be I'm not afraid to do things. Some people have fear. I have concern. I watch my adjectives. I'm concerned about things, but I don't fear anything.
That's a great way to wrap this up, because quite honestly, I would say that is a good way to describe you. You are smart, you are educated, you are very put together, and you are not afraid to try new things and not afraid to live life to the fullest. Correct?
Sounds pretty good.
I love it. Thank you so much, Harold. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for another surprising morning, Dr. R.